Hey, what's up, everybody? So it looks like that we're going to get Thrawn and Ezra. Not just Thrawn or Ezra, Thrawn and Ezra in the Ahsoka series. This is something that has long been rumored, but it looks like we got some confirmation, and we're going to talk about it right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, yeah, it looks like we're getting a lot of more news once again about the Ahsoka series this time. You know, it's interesting because that one's probably going to be later in 2022. I think they're thinking even like November or December or something like that. And Obi-Wan's right in the middle of shooting. So,
right.
You know, it's kind of weird that we're getting all this news about Ahsoka now.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, I'm actually kind of, really curious about her particular story, honestly. When we last kind of left her on The Mandalorian, she had kind of was able to communicate with Grogu and give us some very much needed information, like his name for one. And so we all can stop calling him Baby Yoda.
Right. Well, it didn't necessarily stop us from calling him Baby Yoda, though.
Well, true. But at least, he has an official name now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So there's that. And, we see her kind of get into this whole battle with the magistrate Ellsworth or something. I think that's how you pronounce her name. But anywho, she gets into this whole battle, and that's when she utters the name, where's Thrawn, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And, the whole is like, everybody was just like, wait, Thrawn's coming? And we don't know if he was coming into the Mandalorian. We still don't know. I mean, he still could make an appearance in the Mandalorian and then bounce into the Ahsoka series. But we know, he's coming for sure. We don't know who's playing him yet, but we know he's definitely coming. And apparently Ezra Bridger is with him.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see exactly if they do all this stuff, because we know that we left off where Ezra went with Thrawn in, at the end of Rebels. So it is going to be really interesting, to see. Just our usual suspects are all here, by the way. My mom, Ronaldo, Jason, so everybody's kind of chatting and talking in the chats right now. So that's always good to see. So what's up, everybody? Glad to have everybody with us on this one, because this is actually going to be a really interesting discussion, because you have the potential now for, once again, everything that I have been saying for a long time. And we just did a whole show on this where you basically have Thrawn being, once again, the connective tissue between a lot of these different series. And so if they bring in Thrawn and they bring in Ezra, I think that's just going to be really cool.
Oh, yeah, definitely, man. Essentially, we're almost getting like a live action version of Rebels in a way, which would really be cool, because I actually grew to love that show. When you and I first kind of embarked upon it, we were kind of wondering like what the show is going to be about, and is it going to be too kiddish or anything like that. But after a couple episodes, I mean, it really got into the meat of the matter, and it became pretty cool. So I mean, I'm really anxious to see what happens with Ahsoka, with the with the impending arrival of Grand Admiral Thrawn. And of course, you've been reading all the Thrawn books and everything like that. So I know, you're really just kind of chomping at the bit to kind of see him in live action. And we all are. People have been dressing up as him for cosplay and all these different things. So to see the character, actually being portrayed in live action, but even bigger, who's going to play him? We did a whole show on that too.
Oh, but, yeah. That's it. That's it right there, is the fact that we did this whole show on who's going to play him. And that's going to be important, because
definitely.
Thrawn is definitely going to be, I think, a central character in a lot of these different series. And I've been talking to some people, and some people are like, well, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know. They could see him popping up in Ahsoka, but they don't really think that he's going to pop up anymore. And it's like, you know what? They have basically been really coming up with a lot of Thrawn-centric stuff lately. There's the whole
Hmm.
new trilogy of books that I'm, basically in the middle of reading. Like I said, the second book should be coming out, I think, the end of this month. And then in November, we're going to get the final book of that trilogy. But what's really interesting is that it seemed like the way they left Thrawn's story in Rebels, and remember, you know, here we basically have the whole character of Thrawn. We have the way that he's portrayed in Rebels, which, remember, is different from the way that he's portrayed in the Legends novels. And I think that what's
Hmm.
really cool about this is they changed him a little bit. They didn't change him too much. And of course, they reinforced his Rebels portrayal in the novels. So we're pretty steeped into the way this version of Thrawn is done compared to, let's say, like the Legends novels. But what's really interesting is how when they left off in Rebels and Ezra was with them, now they're thinking of also bringing Ezra now into the Ahsoka series. It's kind of like you said, man. I mean, this is basically becoming like Rebels, 2.5 or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because we once thought that Sasha Banks was going to play the character of Sabine,
Mm-hmm.
and that turned out not to be true. But you definitely got to wonder or think, is she going to pop up too? I mean, she almost kind of has to, especially with the whole um, dark saber and everything. That whole battle going on between the Mandalorian and Bo-Katan. So I think this is really. Prime stomping ground, and this gives us a nice kind of series that can kind of stretch along the timeline of past the Mandalorian into the whole um, era before prior to Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that we last left off with our characters, and I just kind of want to take everybody back. So for those who may not be so familiar, but we had the show Rebels, and on this last episode, um, Thrawn and Ezra kind of had a battle of wits. They were both trying to outsmart each other, and both kind of getting the upper hand on each other at various points, which ultimately left them both being sucked into this whole wormhole, and it would where no one else kind of knows where they ended up. I mean, heck, they probably don't even know where they are. so, so now we're left with our characters of Zeb, Sabine, Ahsoka, Hera, and Agent Callus, who's now going by the name of Spectrum or Fulcrum. He's like Spectre's 5 or 6 or something like that. But anyway, so we kind of are left with those characters, and at the very end, we see Sabine is kind of brooding and kind of thinking about Ezra, and just she's thinking that Ezra wants her to kind of protect Lothal because that's his home, and at the very end, she kind of gives a little bit of a conclusion to everybody else's story. And so, first person we kind of hear about is Hera. Now, we knew Hera, she fought in the Battle of Endor, so that was cool. But we also know that she ends up later on, um, at the end of Rise of Skywalker, because the ghost is seen flying
Mm-hmm.
in that particular battle. But the other thing is that she does have a son with Kanan Jarrus, and that son's name is Jason Syndulla. So that's going to make because now by this time, I would assume that Jason is growing a little bit older. Like I said, this let's see, Mandalorian takes place 6 years after
Yep.
Return of the Jedi. So from what we could see, he was probably already about 6 years old. So he's already like a teenager at this point, or early teens.
Yeah.
So he's probably the same age Ezra was when he started in Rebels. I'm guessing.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's really difficult to say how they're gonna, because obviously this thing's gonna be focused on Ahsoka. We
Hmm.
know that it's the Ahsoka series. We don't really know to what degree Thrawn or even Ezra or any of these characters or anybody that they bring into it for that matter is going to play, because we don't really know the basic synopsis yet. I mean,
True.
we do know that it's taking place during the time of the Mandalorian. So that much we got.
Hmm. Yep.
But other than that, we really don't know. So I think that the trap would be that, you would sit there and go, oh, Thrawn Ezra is going to come back. And it's almost going to be like how Rebels was. But remember, Ahsoka was kind of a side character in Rebels. She didn't show
Yeah.
up until like what, the second season or something?
Maybe third.
Yeah, I mean, I know it was a while. I know it was a little
Yeah.
while. She
I
wasn't in
think
the
it was like the
first
third
season.
season.
Mhm.
Yeah, but see, the thing is though, and here's what's so interesting to me about this already with this group. So we're just talking about Ezra, Thrawn, Ahsoka, Hera, and Jason Syndulla. So remember, Ahsoka left the Jedi Order, so she's
Mhm.
no longer follows the whole Jedi path. Ezra was training to be a Jedi under Kanan. Unfortunately, Kanan met his unfortunate demise. So while he gave himself up for self-sacrifice, and so now you kind of have to wonder what state Ezra's in as far as his Jedi training. Does he still believe in it? Is this what he's still aspiring to be? Or is he going to want to be more like an Ahsoka, where he's just kind of like, kind of a freelance guy? I just kind of go around and help people if I can, that type of thing. And then, of course, now you have Hera, who has a son who's who was made with Kanan. So I'm sure Ezra is going to wants to have some sort of responsibility in making sure that he stays safe, no different than the way Kanan made sure he was safe. So does that mean that Ezra's now going to try to train Jason? How far is Ezra in his Jedi studies? Is he looking to Ahsoka to kind of complete them? Is Ahsoka even considered, because she was a Jedi, but was she considered a master? Could she be considered a master at this point? There's so many different working elements just within those couple of characters, and of course, that kind of creates a whole formidable thing for Thrawn because
Yeah.
now he has three possible, Jedi running around that could put a foil to his whole mission or whatever he's got going on. So I think that alone is really interesting, and it kind of goes to your point though about when we brought up that story. We said, "Can Star Wars live without the Skywalkers?" Here you go. This could be it right here. And on top of that, we're also kind of still lamenting over the sequel trilogy. So perhaps this is the way they kind of softly reboot things, kind of like you said. This could go into movies. We don't know.
Yeah, well, it's also going to be because it's happening at the same time as The Mandalorian. And remember, Ahsoka she didn't really seem like she was all that really excited about picking up the Jedi mantle again. For instance,
Hmm.
she could have been the one to train Grogu, but she didn't.
Sure. Right.
And it was one of those things where she basically was like, look, and she probably knew, I'm sure by now she knew of Luke Skywalker. So,
Probably. And I think she had her own path. That's the other thing too, is that, even though you're not a Jedi, the Force still guides your path. And I think she felt like, her path lied with Ezra, not with Grogu.
yeah, and I mean that would be about the only thing that you could really say because she really did seem like I'm going to, I'm going to help you out a little bit. I'm going to guide you.
Right.
I'm not going to
Right.
just like leave you hanging, which was kind of funny because at first when I was seeing that episode of The Mandalorian, I'm like, man, is she just going to like bail on him without giving him any information or anything? Cuz
Yeah,
here
that was
Din thinks that, yes, I finally found a Jedi. This is cool. I can leave this thing with her and, I'm good. But then she was kind of standoffish about it. And, she's not really giving him a whole lot of. Then she finally says, yeah, okay, his name is Grogu and starts giving him all this information. Once I think she saw this bond and how it was important for him to know these things. But if you notice, it was only the things that she deemed important for him to know that she revealed to him.
hmm
So, given that, I'm not entirely sure. Now, again, we don't know the context of anything that we're talking about here, and I think that that's something that anybody watching this, whether you're watching us live right now or whether you watch the rebroadcast, understand that when we're talking about this, we really don't know the context that these characters are going to be in. So it's really going to be tough to say. So we don't really know if, let's say, Ahsoka would be any more in a hurry to train Jason as she would have Grogu. And why did she leave Grogu to Luke? And she would pick up the mantle and with Jason. But I want to go back to something that you had said earlier, where you're talking about Sabine, because I thought it was really odd that they didn't put Sabine into the Mandalorian, especially when you have Bo-Katan and all that stuff, because she factored really heavily into all that.
Right.
So it does make you wonder, because this is kind of like, I ended up saying go Rebels 2.5, but really, I didn't really get, I was, at first I was kind of considering the Mandalorian being Rebels 2.0, but I don't know, there wasn't enough appearances really yet for that. So if this is going to be kind of like a continuation of Rebels, it would definitely make sense for Sabine to be in it.
Oh yeah, definitely. It definitely would make sense. I mean, especially they kind of had their own kinship anyway, because at the end of Rebels, Ahsoka came back to Lothal and picked up Sabine to go look for Ezra.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
there's a lot of
my thing
connection
is,
there.
yeah, my question is, why is Ahsoka so okay? Why is she so particular about Ezra? Is there something about Ezra that we don't know? Because he's a different kind of force user than we've seen. I can't even call him a Jedi yet, but he's a different kind of force user than what we've seen before. Some of his connections, like I said, to animals and things like that. That's something we've never really seen before.
Yeah, it's
The
kind of
type
like
of visions.
that's like a High Republic kind of thing, to be
Right,
honest.
exactly. The type of visions that he sees, as you've seen, he's gotten pretty powerful. I mean, granted, he's not like Anakin or anything, but I mean, he can hold his own. He's definitely he's crafty. So I kind of put him as like a maybe Empire Strikes Back Luke. Like that's kind of where I look at Ezra. Maybe a little bit above that. Not quite Return of the Jedi Luke though.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, so I'm just kind of wondering, like, why is she? Because, like I said, she owes no one anything. It's like, okay, the Empire's done; they've been destroyed. Palpatine's gone, or at least so we all thought. And then, it's like, okay, what the heck? Like, why are you still looking for Ezra after all this time?
Yeah,
Why are you still hunting for him? You know what I'm saying? So
right.
that's the big question, honestly, is like, why what is her obsession sort of with Ezra and Thrawn?
Well,
And
I was gonna say,
because
even Thrawn, man. What is the deal? It's been how many years?
yeah,
I mean,
and that's
she
what I'm
was
saying.
yeah.
And my whole thing is like, okay, you have Ahsoka, who was okay, she's kind of like this, like I said, freelance person. She doesn't owe anybody anything. She doesn't have to, and she knows Ezra is pretty well trained, but I think she fears Thrawn for a reason. I think she sees that Thrawn could be the next big threat, and I think that's why she's like, okay, I have to find him because Ezra may not be strong enough to do it on his own, and
Well, that's
it'll be
that's a good
kind of
point, though.
unfair.
Right. Because, I mean, it's just kind of like she just drops in the middle of the Mandalorian, like in the dead, pretty much almost the
Yeah,
dead center of the
episode
season.
6. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think it was 5. Pretty sure it was 5. But either way, she's
Okay.
pretty much kind of like in the middle of that season. And, she drops in, she's kind of doing her own thing, and all of a sudden it's like, well, where's Thrawn? And, your people are probably like, what? Who? I mean,
Right.
and of course, the assumption was we thought that, okay, we're going to see Thrawn like in the season finale. It's going to be another one of those Moff Gideon Darksaber moments.
Right.
Where, he was going to either be a hologram or he was going to walk out and say, well done, Moff Gideon, or whatever, It was like, we thought it was going to be something like that. Then we thought, well, okay, maybe they'll hold him off for season 3. Well, now it's looking like he's not really going to even be in The Mandalorian. I mean, he might pop up simply because it would be relevant, right? I mean, it's part of that time period.
Sure.
But yeah, let's get to some of these chats. Because, what would this show be without all the chats?
Yeah.
So,
What's everybody talking about?
yeah, so pretty much Ronaldo's saying, it may be a rumor. So that's good that you actually start out that way. It may be a rumor, but I can't see them doing an Ahsoka series and ignoring Ezra and Thrawn, especially with how Rebels ended. And
Oh yeah,
that's
definitely.
pretty much your point, right?
Yep. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, you can't. I mean, especially if you're bringing like pretty much almost everyone else back. I won't say everyone else back, but at least you know, I'm pretty I pretty much can say that Hera will probably show up.
Yeah, almost definitely.
Um, I think Sabine is a
Mm-hmm.
good possibility of showing up. Zeb could show up as well. I don't think we're going
Pretty
to see
much.
Rex, but Rex,
Yeah. Well, you never know,
I
though.
don't. You never know, but I mean,
Didn't they end up canonizing like that one bearded dude in in Return of the Jedi? They
oh
said was Rex.
yeah,
So he could do that. Ronaldo goes on to say probably Thrawn will be the main antagonist, which yeah, I would say
yeah,
that probably goes without saying that he's probably gonna. They're definitely setting him up because look, they pretty much said, you know, when she said, "Where's Thrawn?" That right there is kind of like, okay, she's
hmm
looking for him for a reason. And it's kind of like you said, we have to figure out what that reason is. Because
right.
it's kind of odd to me. It's not so odd to me that Ahsoka's looking for Thrawn. It's weird to me that she's looking for Thrawn like a
After all this time,
couple of decades after or whatever. I'm trying to figure out.
right?
So it like happens before episode 4. So you got to figure there's probably like a good 10 years in between, that and, well, actually, maybe more like
More.
15,
hmm
because, there's probably like around 10 years just before episode 4 to the end of Return of the Jedi, or close. Because I know
Right.
there's really no more than a year or two that happens in between each one of the original trilogy movies. But at the same time, you got to figure there's still 6 years after Return of the Jedi. So you're probably
hmm
talking, if you want to split the difference, just about 10 years. So
Right.
yeah, why look for him after all this time?
Exactly. And like I said, Ezra's skilled. Kanan trained him pretty well.
Sure.
Um, so what is it that so either what is it about Thrawn that freaks her out so much, or what is it about Ezra that she feels so obligated to him?
Well, and
That's
that's
the
the
big
thing.
question.
And you and I have brought this up on numerous occasions where if they are going to put Thrawn in something because of what happened in Rebels, you almost have to include Ezra in that.
Oh yeah, definitely,
You almost have to.
definitely.
Now Jason says, I think it would be awesome if we see Thrawn and Ezra team up against the Grisk while Ahsoka and Sabine search for Ezra. I mean, that would be kind of cool, and that would be a good way to tie in some of the canon novels that have been coming out. I mean, for
hmm
anybody out there that doesn't know, the Grisk has become like this really cool enemy that have basically been going up against the Chiss, and they're kind of like the outer unknown regions kind of thing that's been going on. I think I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure they were introduced in the Thrawn trilogy that came out a couple years ago, where you have Thrawn Alliances, and Thrawn Treason. I think that they were introduced in there. It could have been in something else, but they popped up in other novels. They popped up in some comics, and they haven't really popped up too much yet in this Ascendancy trilogy, but it wouldn't surprise me. Because
hmm
in this new Thrawn trilogy, you're basically seeing all of these people that the Chiss might fight. Because the basic story of it is you have these attacks that are happening on the Chiss homeworld, and the Chiss are kind of like, who's attacking us? I mean,
hmm
who's even significant enough to attack us? And they have like all these different political houses and stuff. I mean, it's really fascinating stuff. I mean, it really is. If you guys are a fan of not only the more action-oriented parts of Star Wars, but if you're really into the political stuff, this is probably one of the best books besides Bloodline that features that stuff. Because Bloodline features kind of the Republic stuff that we're all familiar with, and it gets you a little bit deeper into that. Whereas this, the Chiss, see what I did there?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So basically, this series of books really delves into the Chiss hierarchy and how it pretty much like explains them. And I was actually skeptical at first. Like, they're kind of cool because of Thrawn and Aralani and all that stuff. But I don't know if I need a whole like book explaining like every little detail. But I'm telling you, man, as soon as I got it, I mean, I was hooked. It is so good. I mean, it's just, I can't even get over how good it is. Ronaldo says, wouldn't it be funny if Ahsoka found Ezra and he's dead because the space whales broke the ship's glass before hyperspace? That'd be hilarious. Done in by the space. It's funny how people just, I mean, we can't let that space whale thing go.
Of course not, man.
It was
especially
so
now that
dumb.
in space whales are like they're sucking in gas and they can go into hyperspace. You're just like, okay, now really, like this is what we're doing, people. Like,
I have to
all
admit,
right.
it was definitely a misstep.
But it's here and it's canon. So, but I think one of those, and maybe they play a bigger, hopefully they play a bigger role in some grand scheme. I mean, because remember, this is the brainchild of Filoni too.
Yeah.
So like Rebels is, and that's another thing too. I'm really excited for as well because once again, it's another thing that Filoni's going to head up because this is his character. Like Ahsoka is his baby.
Well, that's really cool.
You know what I mean?
And I mean, to go along with that, my mom chats in that, I'm glad Thrawn will be the villain. And, it's one of those things where going with that whole thing, I'm glad that Filoni, starting with Rebels, really sees the value of bringing Thrawn in.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's been, like you said, like he's been one of the more beloved characters since the 90s, and it's one of those things like where you don't have Palpatine. Well, once again, so we thought, and we definitely know we don't have Vader anymore. So you need someone who's like kind of familiar with, and that's one of the things that I think they're doing right and as smart is you're taking a character that's already beloved. People already know about him, especially the real Star Wars fans. You already kind of know about Thrawn anyway.
Well, at the
and
time,
so then now you're
only them, though. I mean, that's why I applaud Filoni so much, is because it was really only the super hardcore people that kind of knew about. Now, it's true, more people knew about Thrawn than what you would think, based on him being a novel character.
True, but I mean that's why I love the fact that they brought him into Rebels, and so that now you have him in Rebels. People are already kind of like, okay, this guy's kind of cool, and then now we can bring him to the big screen or to at least a bigger screen.
It's
yeah. I mean, well, he was technically on the screen with animation,
with Rebels, but I mean, now he's into live action, and I think it's
exactly
once you cross into live action, that's where things get real. I mean, look at the bump with Bo-Katan and especially Ahsoka. I mean, everybody went nuts, and it's really started to further that character's development. But let's not forget that even though we do finally have a live action Ahsoka, and even though she is getting her own series now, the bulk is still in animation and books and comics and stuff, because you only really have like one episode that she was in so far. I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, I think, her character, sure, but once again, I think that she's going to be a beacon once again, but for women, but different than like how Rey was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think with Ahsoka comes wisdom. Ahsoka comes, she's had this career where she, like I said, her masters were Obi-Wan, Anakin. I mean, she hung out with like all the top masters. She's done stuff with Mace Windu. She's done stuff with Plo Koon. She's done stuff with Master Yoda. I mean, like her wealth of knowledge, just being around those types of masters in her lifetime, and then the type of things like she was leading commandos in the Clone Wars. I mean, like she has so much rich knowledge, that she's accrued over the years. And then now, of course, as you even with that, as you get older, you kind of put those things into perspective. You kind of reflect on those things. What was good, what was bad, what do you want to keep? All that type of stuff.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I think that's what we're going to see with Ahsoka. We're going to see this really mature, very kind of common as we kind of saw her with Grogu. But we still know that she can get busy with lightsabers too, though. Since she hasn't forgotten, and she still, it was cool to see Rosario Dawson be able to emulate a lot of the different movements that her character did in animation. So I think when we start to look at Ahsoka, we're going to see a different type of character, almost what everybody kind of wished Rey could have been. We're going to
Mhm.
get in Ahsoka. And
Well,
that's
the
why I
thing
feel like,
is,
to your point, we're going to get that soft reboot, kind of maybe through this particular series.
yeah. Well, I mean, before I go on, I got to put this one. Jason says, "Don't insult my species. Purgles are awesome. It must be the space one. I'd forgotten what they were called, to be honest. Because I mean, we're just so glad that it was just
We got Purgles,
yeah. We
Porgs,
got
we got
yeah, exactly. But I mean, to the point though, and this is something when you talk about when you basically talk about the whole Ahsoka series as a whole, right?
Mhm.
Not just focusing on these characters. I think you are going to see something a little different than what we would call the continuation of the Skywalker saga, which of course was episode 7, 8, 9, where Rey was pretty much the prominent Jedi in the sense of, and this is true really with everything. In the prequel trilogy, it was Anakin. In the original trilogy, it was Luke. In the sequel trilogy, it was Rey. And what these
Mhm.
all have in common is that we're seeing Jedi kind of at the beginning of their journey, right?
Right.
They're first of all finding out about the Jedi and what they are and what they're all about, and then secondly, we're basically learning about everything through their eyes. What makes the Ahsoka thing so much more interesting, which is what you were alluding to, is the fact that now we're going to actually pick up with somebody who's not, I'm not saying like at the end, but kind of like on the other side of that. Like you
Mm.
said, she's been through so much. She's led. She's a seasoned, experienced veteran
Yep.
um type of thing. And we have never really seen anything be focused on that. I mean, sure, you've had Obi-Wan, you've had Yoda, you've had other characters like that that have played a part, but it's usually playing a part in the hero's journey or the
Right.
heroine's journey in the case of Rey.
Right.
Is the fact that you had Anakin, you had Luke, you had Rey, and it's sort of like these older, wiser characters have played a part in their journey and their development and their discoveries. But now the focused character is one of those older, wiser Jedi. And we've never seen
Yeah.
that before.
That is very true. That's very true.
And that's what actually makes
And
me really excited about it.
oh yeah, I could definitely understand why. You know what I'm saying? Because you kind of want to see, and that's kind of how we felt like we wanted to see Luke. You know what I'm saying? Like we kind of felt like we got ripped off a bit when we didn't see a truly seasoned Luke Skywalker
Hmm.
at the zenith of his power. I mean, we got a snippet of it at the end of Mandalorian, which is what got everybody so like just going through the roof because it's like, yes, this is the Luke we've been wanting to see. And it's like, okay, you gave us a little bit of it, so thank
Yeah,
you.
like 5 minutes or something.
But
I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's true because think about
exactly.
it. When we've never really had a good payoff that way. I mean, when
No.
Anakin finally develops, he becomes evil. Right?
But
We
at least
never
but at least when he does, he becomes the most powerful, like one of the
Well,
most
yeah,
powerful
but I
evil
mean, I'm
guys.
just saying though, but he in essence he becomes a different character though.
Yeah,
If you
true.
really think about it. I mean, I know it
That's
sounds like
true.
I'm kind of splitting hairs, but it's true. We
No,
never
you did
really
the
get to
Obi-Wan thing.
see
He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker, became Darth
Yeah,
Vader. I gotcha.
exactly. But I mean, I'm doing this for a reason though, because you basically have a situation where we never got to see a seasoned, older, wiser Anakin. You know, I mean, you can almost make the argument that he's kind of approaching that in Revenge of the Sith, maybe even at the very end of the Clone Wars, because you could tell that he's really, especially in season 7 of the Clone Wars, he's kind of grown into his role as Ahsoka's master, and he just sounds different.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're never rewarded with that, right? Luke Skywalker, you just brought it up, same thing. Except for like the 5 minutes that we get in The Mandalorian, which is essentially an action scene. There's not even any dialogue. You know, some can make the argument, oh, well, what about The Force Awakens? Well, you know, and then leading into the sequel trilogy. But in that, we just, you know, he's kind of disillusioned and disappointed. It's not him really at the zenith of his grandmaster powers as far as, you know, what he was trying to do.
And to your point also, you know, we never got that from Kylo either.
Well, I was just about to bring that up. Is that with Ben Solo? He kind of does the Darth Vader thing. You know, you hear about it, but I mean, you don't really get to see it. Ben Solo and Kylo Ren really are two different characters too. And same thing with Rey. I mean, you kind of a little bit, but it was basically at the end of Rise of Skywalker that you can tell, okay, moving forward, she might sort of grow into that, maybe in a couple of movies or something. But the point is, you never actually see it happen anywhere. You know, the focal point of the characters, you always get to see the beginning. You never get to see, so it's never really satisfying.
Right. Yeah, that's a very valid point.
You know, you bring them up to a certain level, and I think that that's the reason why everybody went psycho over the Legends novels. Because that was where you did get to see Luke. You got that payoff, and I think that that was one of the problems that we had with Star Wars. Even though I get it with the storytelling part, it was a missed opportunity that they had for 7, 8, and 9 with Luke, but it's kind of like we never got the payoff for any of them. And this is something that can be fixed with Ahsoka, because Ahsoka, as you and I have pointed out in many shows, Ahsoka is really the one character, and I think the only character in Star Wars where we see from the absolute beginning, when she's just kind of like a, you know, wisecracking teenager, basically, kind of new to the whole thing and eager to prove herself to her master, all the way to where we see her now. So it's,
and that's
really
why I'm really curious.
Yes, it's more of a complete journey.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's why I'm really curious to see, like, by standard, would Ahsoka be considered Master Tano, or would she still be? I mean, I'm talking about as far as ability. And see, the thing is, it's kind of hard to say because she's never. Because I think to be a master, one of the things you have to take a Padawan, and she's never had that. Yeah, so that's why maybe, like, you know, and maybe that's what. Maybe that's what Ezra eventually becomes.
Well, maybe. I mean, the Ezra thing is kind of a weird situation too, because if you think about it, he was trained by a glorified Padawan.
Yeah.
I mean, Kanan never made it beyond Padawan. I mean, I remember even in the beginning of Rebels, it was all like, well, all right, look, you know.
I'll tell you what I know. I mean,
yeah, a Padawan was the only thing that I got to before Order 66, so I'll kind of show you what I know, and we'll learn together. And that was what actually made their master-apprentice relationship interesting, was the fact there was a lot of things they were learning together, and then some things Ezra was even teaching Kanan. Yeah. So, and it was kind of nice to see Kanan's journey that way too. And you could almost make the argument that Kanan is somebody that we saw from the beginning, because, you know, he was essentially a glorified Padawan when we meet him, but he comes into his own as well. So, true. I mean, you know, there's that.
And do you think do you think we also will see Jason Syndulla as part of this whole thing now?
I really wonder where they're gonna go with that character because um it's it's interesting that they put that. I'm not really sure what Filoni's plans were at the end of Rebels. I don't think that he anticipated. He knew there would be live action versions of all this stuff, but I don't know if he really anticipated this is the direction he was going to go. I will say though that I think that there's definitely a plan.
Oh yeah,
That
I think what could happen though is I don't think we're going to get that, of course, out the gate. I think the whole and it depends on we don't know how long Ahsoka's that series is going to run either. Unlike some other ones like Obi-Wan, Ahsoka is in the limited series, and the reason being is because you could tell so many stories with her
yeah.
because there's she spans across multiple timelines, but with Ahsoka, I think that maybe season one is definitely going to be focused on Ezra, Thrawn, that type of deal. We might get like a climactic thing like at the end of season one that's going to get us like, okay, man, what's going to happen in season two? And I think eventually maybe like season two, season three, maybe we might see like, okay, now Hera's bringing her child around. It's like, hey, I want my son to kind of get in touch with his, be able to control his abilities and be able to use them for good and things like that, just like you guys do. And, I can
Man,
kind
you
of
know
see
what?
that being a thing.
It's so hard to do this without the context.
I know, right?
I mean, it is so difficult. I mean, even speculation. It's like because this could go in a lot of different directions. I mean, I
Sure.
agree. I don't think Jason's going to be in season 1, episode 1, but we really don't know. And a lot of it's going to depend on when Hera comes into the picture.
Hmm.
I will say that when she comes into the picture, then he'll come into the picture.
Definitely.
That would be my prediction. But, let's go to some of more of these chats here because, so Ronaldo basically says, we have no confirmation of this, but do you think this will be a limited series or will we have more seasons? That kind of goes into what we were just talking about, actually.
Right.
I think that it's going to be a multi-season thing.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a limited series. I mean, especially when you've been waiting to see a character like Ahsoka for so long come to life. I think they're we're going to get the juice out of this one. With Obi-Wan, his story is kind of, I mean, we saw him from the time he was a Padawan to all the way he became a master. So it's kind of like, all right, what more can you really, do with him at this point? We've seen him train, do some stuff with Luke. He
Yeah.
died. I mean, we've seen his. I mean, it's only so far you can go with Obi-Wan at this point. So I can understand why that's a limited run or a limited series, but
Well,
with Ahsoka
I'll put
though,
it like this, man. The Obi-Wan thing, it's kind of like what you once said of one of my relationships. Has an expiration date. And it's for that very reason that you have to, because if you think about it, what are the limited series that we know about right now? Obi-Wan is one of them. Book of Boba Fett, I believe, is the other one.
Yep, because Andor can go for a little bit.
Andor can go for a little bit, and those are the ones that were confirmed. I think they confirmed Book
Right.
of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan are going to be the limited series, and that's because there's probably a story that they want to tell that they don't want to tie up anytime in any of their other major series, but it's something they need to tell. And I suspect that one of the other reasons why they're bringing the Obi-Wan thing out, besides the popularity, is also because there might be some things that stories they want to tell, and they need to get this Obi-Wan stuff out of there in order to establish that.
Not only that, but I also think that those two stories are somewhat connected.
Yeah. Well, and again, you basically have a lot of the Darth Maul stuff. I mean, there's some things that probably happened during the Obi-Wan series that may not even directly involve Obi-Wan himself. However, this is these are kind of the things that we definitely have to watch for because there's a method to their madness, guys. Okay, so Jason, he's basically talking about something we were talking about before where, seeing people from their very beginnings or whatever. He says we have Yoda. And I can understand why you might think that. And from a certain point of view, I could even see that kind of being the case. But
Yoda, as
not,
far as what?
well, as far as we see a little bit of his journey, but again, even if you go to the High Republic, he's still kind of a well-established Jedi Master. I mean, I'm pretty much thinking that that's the context.
Yeah,
Jason, if we're taking that comment out of context, let us know. we're in kind of a chat period right now, so this would be a good time to clarify. Oh, my mom asked an interesting question. She's like, who is Ezra, and does he have a novel or comic I have to read? Now, this kind of goes back into this past Friday?
Friday. Yeah, this past
Friday's
Friday.
thing. So again, and of course, Jason basically answered her in the chats, but Ezra was basically one of the main characters in Rebels. This is why we said that for anybody that's really interested. And of course, Jason had a really good comment, by the way, in our Friday show, in the comments section, where he goes into the order he thinks people should watch the movies and things like this. And he kind of broke it down a little bit further with the, beyond basically the basics, figuring out what people are into. But definitely, besides the movies, you gotta tune into the whole Clone Wars animated series as well as Rebels. Otherwise, you might be a little bit lost. I mean, it's true you could go with just the comics and the books and all that stuff, but there's a lot of canon in that. There's a lot of characters that are introduced in that, and there's a lot of things that they reference. Like in The Mandalorian, they're constantly referencing stuff that happened back in the Clone Wars or Rebels. And then Ronaldo basically talking about where Ahsoka's at. He's like, she's master level, I think, but she's not a Jedi Master officially. And I think that's basically what you and I were talking about too, where you basically have this whole thing of, okay, ability-wise, they're kind of at a master level, but they can't be official because, well, one, she did leave the order,
Not only that, but you don't have anybody who's really can ordain that.
Yeah, exactly.
At this point.
Exactly. And so then Ronaldo goes on to say, I wonder if Jason Syndulla will be important in some time. I'm assuming he's becoming a teenager and maybe more force sensitive. And then he goes on to say, or maybe Kylo killed him along with Grogu. And now Jason comes in and he basically clarifies his statement by saying, we have Yoda was in the context of you saying we don't have a fully developed Jedi character. Misunderstood what you were saying at first. Yeah, that's what we were saying, was not so much a fully developed Jedi character, but somebody that we've seen from beginning to end because, yeah, we see all these Jedi in the start and then something happens to them. Ahsoka's really the only one that we've seen from the very beginning all the way through her development. With Anakin, with Luke, with Kylo, with Rey, at least so far, it's the same thing. You see them up until they get interesting, and then something happens. Anakin becomes Darth Vader. Ben Solo becomes Kylo Ren. Luke becomes grumpy.
Right.
Disillusioned, I mean, it's just kind of one of
the
those.
Old man.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that's funny about Luke, though, where Luke's a little bit different, is that you have Luke kind of in the beginning, right up until he gets to where you want him to be. Like, yes, now he's kind of a fully trained Jedi or whatever. And then you skip like 30 years, and then you see him on the other side of it. But now he's all disillusioned and cutting himself out from the Force and everything else. So we get 5 minutes of what we really want to see with live action Luke. So that's that's pretty crazy there. Jason goes on to say, in power, wisdom, and experience, Ahsoka is a Jedi Master. In reality, she isn't even knighted.
I believe they did cut her braid.
I believe so too. I think that I think there was an episode where she was actually officially knighted. I have to go back and see what episode that actually was. But I don't know. Ronaldo says, this is actually a good point. We saw Obi-Wan develop from a Padawan to a master. Not all his journey, just a bit. And I would go along with that. I would go along with maybe Obi-Wan would be a close second. He's the one that we've actually seen probably the most of. It's not,
Yeah.
he was already kind of well established as a Padawan, but you could almost make the argument that Ahsoka kind of was too. It's just that Ahsoka was a little bit younger than Obi-Wan, that's all.
Right.
Jason says they offered to knight her, but she decided to leave the order. So yeah, that I don't
know, because I keep thinking that the episode when she saved those kids, remember the younglings that were on this trapped on that ship? I felt like after that they cut her braid, but I think that was it.
Well, and the other problem too is a lot of times those little wartime promotions, it's almost like, what were they actually? I mean, was it a real thing? Because it was all no different than making well, they technically made Anakin a master, but they didn't let him on the council. It was almost like they were playing hard and fast with the rules sometimes.
But that was the thing. That was the thing that made them mad, was that they did that.
Right. But I'm just saying, it was kind of like, it was almost like they granted him the master thing because he was so good and because they needed him to be a general in order to, lead armies and stuff like that.
Yeah, they put him on a council, but they didn't give him the rank of master. And that's what his issue was, like, well, how can I be on the council if I'm not a master?
Was that what it was? Did I get that backwards?
Yeah. His whole thing was the fact that
you're right.
Yeah, they put him on the council.
Yep.
Yeah, but he was upset. They didn't grant him the rank of master. That's why even the comic you sent me today, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
When Darth Vader decided to knight himself as master.
Oh, that was actually pretty funny. I should have actually put that in this show. So
but
Ronaldo basically says, let's just take Ahsoka's word as truth. I'm not a Jedi. And that's pretty much
ultimately.
it. Yeah. I mean, and again, as what we often do on this show, either us or you guys or all of us, there's that splitting hair thing to where when we say complete journey, yes, she left the Jedi Order. Yes, she rejected a lot of the stuff. But the fact is, we saw her right there at the beginning and through the end and even where she's developed. And I would actually argue that this makes her character even more interesting. Because a lot of people, even though people say that Qui-Gon is really the first example that we have in practice of a gray Jedi, Ahsoka kind of furthers that a little bit.
Yeah, because, I mean, the thing is, see, Ahsoka to me is the perfect example, and I guess the one that we've actually seen. I would say Ahsoka will be the first, because Qui-Gon, although he has some of the, I mean, he wasn't necessarily a rogue Jedi because he still followed the Jedi custom.
Well, great Jedi.
You know what I'm saying? It's just,
I mean, there's examples of them doing it too, though. It's not so much that they don't follow the custom; they just, well, maybe not. To the letter.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's what I mean. Like, so when you look at Qui-Gon and Quinlan Vos, for example, like those two they're just kind of renegade Jedi. They're kind of mavericks, but they're still Jedi. They still follow the Jedi code. But a gray Jedi doesn't have an attachment to the religion or the code per se. They just more or less move in a space of, sometimes I'll use dark, sometimes I'll use light, just depends on the situation. Whereas Qui-Gon is always going to choose the light side. He just may skirt the edges a little bit of rules, but he's still on that side. Whereas a
Well,
gray is kind of like literally, I mean, because you're not going to see Qui-Gon like force choking, people, because that's just too aggressive. But a gray Jedi would, in the sense of, okay, I need this, like what Anakin was doing at one point. He was kind of in that gray area before he went dark. You see what I'm saying? He was in that
yeah.
gray because he felt like, all right, I need this information and you're not giving it to me. I'm trying to be diplomatic with you and it's not working. I don't have a whole lot of time to argue with you. Screw it. I'm choking you. You're going to give it to
Yeah, I
me.
mean, don't get me wrong. I
And
could easily make the argument that Anakin was really an example of a gray Jedi in that sense. But
right.
remember, a gray Jedi is not just the fact that you use light and dark. It's also kind of a sort of going in the middle type of a thing. Well, Jason agrees with you. But that's the thing, is that you could even go Mace was a little bit of an example of that as well. Even though he didn't necessarily, we don't really, the Dark Disciple novel is probably the closest we get to it.
Mm-hmm.
But because that's where we see a little bit more of Mace and sort of his aggression and how he feels. But at the same time, he does use a little bit of the dark side in his fighting style.
Right.
But I don't know if that would really qualify. I mean, Mace pretty much plays by the Jedi code too. After all, he is the number 2 guy.
Yeah,
It's
kind
like,
of has to.
yeah, he kind of has to.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just think that it's really interesting, though, that you're focusing on a character with this new series. She basically just abandoned the whole thing. And that's something we really haven't seen before, at least as prominently as this, because you have a situation where it's not just somebody bending the rules like a Qui-Gon or maybe using techniques from both sides like Anakin. I mean, you have somebody that literally left the Jedi Order. But what I find interesting is it's not like she left the Jedi Order like Dooku left the Jedi Order.
Right. I was just about to say that. It's not like she turned to another side. She just decided just to walk away from everything.
Yeah, and that's
it's almost kind of like in a way that Asajj Ventress kind of did the same thing, just on the dark side.
Yes, and in fact, I think that one of the reasons why Asajj and Ahsoka kind of became friends was because of the fact that she's pretty much the Ahsoka of the dark.
Mm-hmm.
She pretty much left, and she was even kind of a good guy there for a bit.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really interesting, and that's why I hope that at some point we get her in live action. I mean, even though she was killed, right? Pretty sure Asajj was killed.
I believe so.
I'm pretty sure she was killed. We always go through this, like every show. Every show we always, and before, because we were working out the whole Agent Callus thing before the show. So we found out definitively that Agent Callus is still alive. But wouldn't you know it, it wouldn't be a live show without us thinking that somebody was dead and they're not, or maybe we think they're alive but they're dead, or there's always somebody. So I'm sure in the chat somewhere it'll pop up. But I'm pretty sure Asajj is... Oh, yeah, she is dead because she was killed off in Dark Disciple. Spoiler alert. That's right. That's right. She sacrifices her life. So, yeah, that's one of those things that I would still, though, like to see her pop up somewhere, wherever it would be appropriate. Because Ventress was just, hands down, one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I loved her character.
And she actually popped up in the original 3-minute Clone Wars cartoons, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think that's where she was introduced.
I think they just released those, too.
They did. They're on Disney Plus. Basically, a week ago, when I did the show solo, and I was ranting about the Droid series, which is really hilarious. If you guys... I basically kind of lost it and was just going off on... I even on the graphic, it says, does anybody care? I mean, it was just kind of like one of those things. Now, I do have to preface this by saying, though, I actually kind of enjoy that series. I remember when I showed it to you when we were working together, And, I think we were just watching it from YouTube or something, like these old horrible
Mm-hmm.
bootleg versions from YouTube. I mean, not really bootleg. They were probably just recorded off of TV back in like 1985 or whenever it was, but it was campy and it was funny, but it was kind of weird. And now they also have the Ewok Adventures. Those are on there. I mean, they're putting everything on there
Oh
now.
wow!
So
The original holiday special is going to be up there.
I said that too. I'm like, what's next? The original holiday special?
Yep.
I mean, why not? I mean, if you're putting all this stuff on there, and then it's, because it was basically like my whole thing. I mean, I was kind of being funny about it, but I was being serious. It's like, does anybody really care about these things? Now, the Clone Wars shorts, though, a lot of people did like those. So I could see them putting those on there. But I think that Disney is maybe doing this for more like a completist, so everything's on there. But it's kind of like, look, man, if you're going to put Ewok Adventures and Droid Adventures and all this other stuff, you're going to have to just bite the bullet and put the holiday special on there, too. In the interest of being a completist.
Of fairness, right.
Yeah. I mean, Lucas would probably lose his mind if you do that, but... And I thought that there was a clause in the sale or something that was like, yeah, man, you can do whatever you want, but there's two things that you cannot do. You cannot re-release the theatrical versions of the original trilogy, and you cannot release a holiday special. So, I mean, that should be interesting. But now, going back to this whole Ahsoka series thing, we did find it interesting that they're thinking of casting... the kid that played Aladdin in the live-action Aladdin as Ezra.
Yeah, that's it hasn't been confirmed yet, but they have been kind of chucking that idea around of him actually playing Ezra. And then there's like they're looking for like another Caribbean kid that's like between 20 and 30 years old named, I guess he's playing the character named Boca, which is interesting.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, it's really going to be interesting because they're, of course they're casting a lot of these things now. We've gotten a little bit more of an idea of the casting for Andor and Obi-Wan, because we did a whole show like, I don't know, a couple weeks ago on the Obi-Wan cast. Went through everybody that's on that. And it's really interesting how they're casting all these different series too, because it really makes you wonder what kind of characters that they're putting in based on the descriptions.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so,
as a side note, I have to say too that with the whole Indiana Jones 5 thing.
Oh yeah.
I thought that it was really weird that Phoebe something Waller, she was basically the voice of L3 in Solo. She's actually now going to be in the movie along with the real Han Solo. And John Williams is coming back to do the music. So it's going to be kind of weird hearing the voice of L3 with Harrison Ford. That's just going to be kind of an odd thing. But casting choices are really intriguing to me because you can actually guess a lot about the characters based on some of the traits they want from some of the actors. But what do you think of if they use the Aladdin kid for Ezra?
Oh,
I personally think that's dead on. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Mina Masood. Yeah, he looks exactly like Ezra. Honestly, I mean, and he kind of had, even the way he played Aladdin, you could definitely. He gave you Ezra vibes. I mean, that's just the best way I could.
I mean, if you really want to be honest, if you remember when we first started watching Rebels, like that first episode, we kept calling him Aladdin. We kept
he's kind of drawn that way.
Something, yeah, it'd be like, hey, street rats. It's like, I mean, so now it's kind of like he reminded me of Aladdin, especially when he had like the longer hair and stuff like that in the early seasons.
Yeah, and his character was kind of like that. He was kind of like the homeless kid, just kind of running around trying to, just
stealing
crafty
stuff,
and trying to stealing stuff. Yep. So it's kind of it fits.
Completely. So, I mean, I would be all about it. I think that would be very smart casting because I was actually impressed with him as Aladdin. I
Hmm.
thought he captured the animated Aladdin perfectly. I mean,
Yeah.
I was really surprised because I also really enjoyed Will Smith as a genie. And I just did not think I was going to do it, but he was smart. He didn't try to cop Robin Williams' thing. He kept kind of the same, that same thing.
Quirkiness.
Yeah, that same quirkiness and humor and stuff, but he didn't try to like rip it off or do it.
Hmm.
So I was really happy to see that. So I think that, yeah, this is actually a smart bit of casting. I think he'll make a really good Ezra.
Yep. And now we just have to find who's going to be our Thrawn, and that's going to be once we find out who's playing Thrawn. We're going to be talking about that.
Oh yeah, well, and that's a good question too. When you think that they're gonna announce all this stuff? I mean, it seems like there's Star Wars news coming out almost daily at this point.
I mean, I probably won't. I probably say they probably won't come out with that maybe until like maybe early summer, somewhere around there.
Yeah, because like I said, they're theorizing the fact that this show could be released around November, December of 2022. So we've got some time.
Yep.
But oddly enough, it sounded though like from everything that I read about this that they're going to start to go into production with this thing in the not too distant future, which I also find
Yeah.
interesting because it's kind of like, I mean, I guess it makes sense if they want this stuff in the can.
Not only that, but I mean, after we've learned, this past year, you never know what's going to happen in the world. You would kind of get this stuff
Yeah, it's
out
kind of
there.
like, you know what, do it while you can type of a thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
exactly.
I agree. Well, I mean, before we say goodbye to everybody, let's see what we got here in the chats, cuz okay, so Ronaldo says Qui-Gon disagrees with the Jedi's "we don't love people" rule, but he still follows the light. And then he follows that up with a question. He says, "Do you think the Ahsoka series will be better than Mandalorian or more popular?" That's a really,
Mm.
really, really good question.
Mm. I think once again, I think it all depends on the stories that are told by both series. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really going to, um, and that's the kind of the problem with Mandalorian right now is that they have, I mean, their only competition is what they've done last, and so
Yeah, they're
once
kind
you've
of the first
introduced,
live action series like that.
but I mean, it's just kind of like once you introduce like baby, Grogu, into the situation, you know, that became like everybody was like talking about it. And so then now, like, okay, if he's gone off with Luke, well, now you have to redirect everyone's focus again. Because if you think about it, like from what episode 2
Yeah.
is when we found, Grogu.
But
So
at
if
this
he's been with him for the whole time. He's been carrying around this baby the whole time. And so then now that the baby's gone, it's like, okay, well, what do you fill that space with story wise? Like, okay, well, now we have to shift everyone's focus off of Grogu into another direction. And I think once you establish that, if that takes well, then you could say, like, okay, well, you know what, now you have to see what Ahsoka does. But I think Ahsoka has the promise of it because of Thrawn, because the thing is with you're dealing with known characters in
Yep.
Ahsoka as opposed to unknown characters in Mandalorian,
That's
which
exactly what I was going to say. I mean, granted, it's amazing though, to the Mandalorian's credit. I mean, I'll say a couple of things because first of all, the first episode a lot of people loved, and this is before Grogu was even introduced. And really, I don't think he was
Mhm.
introduced until was
It's
it
either the
the
second or third episode.
I thought, well, it was the very end because it was that whole little, finger touch thingy or whatever. That might have been even at the end of the first one. But yeah, it was like second or third. It was second episode. I'm just trying to remember when in the episode. But that doesn't even really matter because you did get a bulk of the first episode that was just The Mandalorian. A lot of people loved it. There's no doubt in my mind, or I think anybody could really argue the fact that Grogu definitely added a wide mass appeal to the show. But I
Hmm.
think that people are invested enough in the show now because, to their credit, the Mandalorian's characters stand up with now all these other ones. But I do have to say that I agree with you, though, in the sense of that Ahsoka has more of the established characters that we've lived with for a long time. Some of them dating back
Yeah.
to the Clone Wars,
Right.
and then, of course, through like what, 4 or 5 seasons of Rebels. I mean, and then even some of them have appeared in The Mandalorian. So you definitely have, I think, a situation where the deck is stacked in their favor. Now, popularity wise, I think it's really going to depend on number one, what type of show is Ahsoka going to be? In
Yeah,
other
like the
words,
style of it.
yeah, like the style of it.
Right.
Because
Because
it's
Mandalorian is more of a Western, so.
right. So it's really kind of like what appeals to you.
Hmm.
Because you could really be invested in the characters, but you might not like the style, or maybe you don't even like the story or whatever. I mean, let's face it, if it's got a bunch of characters that we love, especially if it has Thrawn, everybody's going to be watching. But
Definitely.
I think that it has, and this is what I think Lucasfilm is doing that's really smart, is that they're stacking, they're not just making these little one-off series. That was a mistake that I think that they made with the standalone films, even though they only really made 2 of them, is the fact that they tried to make it purely these standalone movies that were released in between the saga. What they're doing with the TV series, which I think is brilliant, is they're actually connecting them. So they're really like a part of this one big shared universe. I mean, you can make the argument that, it's Star Wars, that's the shared universe, but I mean, the characters, it's kind of like a crossover thing. Almost like what
Yeah.
Marvel does, or DC,
DC.
or even DC television, right? Marvel
Right.
television. So I think that one of the smart things that they're doing with this is that they're using the Mandalorian. Now, it's going to be interesting to me to see if they continue using the Mandalorian to seed out all these different series that they're going to do. They kind of have in the initial run. Ahsoka seeded out because Ahsoka appeared, and that's kind of like, okay, now she's the spinoff. Rangers of the Republic was going to feature Cara Dune pretty heavily. Now that's not going to happen, but still, I find it impossible to believe that, some of the Mandalorian characters wouldn't pop up in that series. Then, of course, you got the Book of Boba Fett. So you
Hmm.
have a bunch of stuff that's being spawned off of the Mandalorian, and it's going to be interesting to me to see if in the future, are they going to keep doing that? As the Mandalorian moves forward, is it going to be like the Mothership, and then all these other series are going to be spawned off of it? If that's the case, I would say that its popularity would probably remain steady. And then, of course, as you pointed out, I think that it's going to depend a lot on what they do now without Grogu there to bring in the, oh, isn't he adorable?
Right.
Because there's this there's this old classmate of mine that messages me. We'll talk back and forth sometimes, and she's constantly sending me all these Grogu memes and gifs or gifs, and all this other stuff. And she likes Star Wars a lot, but she just loves the Grogu character. All these people have
Hmm.
just gone insane over him.
Yeah.
And if he's not there, I am
Right.
afraid, as much as I would hate to admit it, I'm afraid that maybe it's going to take a hit. But I
Yeah,
do
it may.
think that people are invested enough in the characters, and I do think that people are invested enough in the show itself that I think it's going to be fine. I think that any hit that it takes is going to be negligible. But it is going to be interesting because it's kind of like you said, up until now, they really only had to compete with themselves. They're the only live action Star Wars thing. Other than the films.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, they're only as good as their last thing that they did. It's more so like what I'm talking about. It's kind of like you're always chasing your last thing. It's kind of like Michael Jackson once said, it's like the last album was the last album. Like when he makes a new album, he's trying to beat Thriller. Like he's always trying to beat Thriller. Even though it's like, it's almost like impossible because the thriller was its own thing, but that's the goal. So it's like each progressive season, you're trying to up it a bit and try to make it better than the last thing. So, of course, when we end season one with the whole Darksaber thing, we're just like, whoa, that's crazy. But then we get to the end of season two, we're like, no, like it's just like, okay, so like, what do you do after season three now? You know what I'm saying? Like you kind of have that, kind of have to keep that.
Yeah, that's a good
tradition
point.
now.
What are they going to do?
You see what I'm
Prop up
saying?
a dead Vader? And I mean, it's kind of like,
So I mean, it's just kind of like you constantly have to find out new ways to reinvent yourself every time to keep the thing fresh and
well,
relevant and creative.
I mean, I think that honestly, a lot of it just has to do with, like you and I always say, the Star Wars universe is a fertile ground for storytelling. As long as you're telling great stories with compelling characters, you're going to be fine. And one of the things that I think is great is that Filoni and Favreau seem to understand that. Kathleen Kennedy does not. And I think that's the fundamental problem. I think that's the difference between the Star Wars films as of late and the TV shows, is that Kathleen Kennedy does not get that concept. She's always trying to either put more modern messaging into it or, finding something that's going to appeal to this age group or that age group or, in that sense, unfortunately, she is thinking like a studio head. And that's unfortunate because Favreau and Filoni have proven that you tell great stories with compelling characters in this wonderful universe that Lucas created, you're going to be fine. You don't have to worry about one-upping anything. You don't have to worry about anything because there's a lot of story involved in this. I mean, look at this latest Thrawn trilogy that I was talking about. It does not involve anything. There's like one page dedicated to a chance meeting between Thrawn and Anakin, but it's negligible. It doesn't even last that long. Because this is basically like a prequel to even, like the Clone Wars is kind of going on around the same time as this, but this is before Thrawn makes any kind of contact with the Empire or anything like that, or becomes, a cadet and all this stuff. I mean, it's essentially a prequel to the last Thrawn trilogy that came out. And it's fantastic. And it feels like Star Wars. Because you have a great story with compelling characters. And as long as you keep doing that, then you're going to be fine. And you don't have to worry about competing with anything. And there's the nice thing about Star Wars is it's so vast that you can tell tons of different stories, focusing on a lot of different areas and really never run out if you do it right.
Oh, yeah. I completely agree.
All right, so you got anything else on Thrawn and Ezra for this? All right, well, all right. So here's the way it's gonna go, guys. So next Monday, we have the High Republic issue number 4. Which, have you had a chance to read it yet?
Not yet.
It's really good. I had a chance to read it, so we are going, and I'm sure by next Monday you'll have read it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we're going to do our review. We've been reviewing all the issues. So issue number 4 was released last Wednesday. So next Monday, we're going to do the High Republic issue number 4 review. This Friday, there's a lot of stuff that's going around that we can talk about. So like I said, we'll obviously pick something. But if you guys have any ideas, like if there's something that you would like to see us talk about, put it in the comments section. And, we'll take a look at it over the next couple of days. And if anything jumps out at us, that's what we'll talk about. And we'll mention that it was your idea on the show. We won't take credit for it, But if not, we'll go with it. But I will put this little thing in. So my second vaccine shot is Thursday. And the second shot has really been tearing people up. In fact, my poor mom was hospitalized over the weekend after her second shot. And since I share some of that gene pool, it's not looking too good. But a lot of people have been reporting like these really crazy, horrible side effects. And I have a 7 a.m. call the next day for this thing I got to do. So more than likely, we'll be back on Friday. Everything will be cool. But, you know, if for some reason we don't make it, you guys will know why. It's because I'm laid up horribly, deathly ill or whatever. But
So would you say that's the last shot?
yeah, well, I hope
You
so.
finished?
I sincerely hope it is.
I hope it doesn't finish you.
Well, you know what? It took a long time for me to finish it. You know, maybe
There you go.
I don't know. What a way to end the show with dad jokes. Dad jokes that only
Hey.
Star Wars fans would get, and only certain Star Wars fans would understand it. That's what's even better.
What's even
But-
funnier, neither one of us are fathers.
I know. That's what actually makes it even better. Is that neither one of us have any kids. But you know what? Look, dad jokes are age appropriate, I guess.
Yep.
I'm kind of entering into that, into that realm. Trying not to admit it too much, but hey, every day that you're above ground, right? All right, but
Yep.
with that, guys, we will more than likely see you Friday. We'll definitely see you next Monday. With that, I am Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the force be with you, always.